One of the most heavily debated topics in the Clash Royale community is balance changes. It doesn't matter what Clash Royale does, there is always going to be some controversy in the community about the balance changes. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about 6 cards that Clash Royale just can't seem to balance right. And I'm also going to tell you why I honestly think these cards might never be balanced. So really quick, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe. I greatly appreciate that. Now let's get on to the video. I have 3 categories of cards that I want to talk about in this video. Healing cards, elixir cards, and movement cards. And then at the end, I have 1 secret category that I'm going to talk about, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Let's start out by talking about the healing cards. Healing mechanics across all video games is going to be one of those things that's always going to be hard to balance. One thing that pretty much any game with combat has is health, so taking that core fundamental and adding something to the game that can manipulate that is always going to be pretty unbalanced. And the battle healer and the heal spirit definitely fall under that category. When the battle healer was first released in December 2019, she was ridiculous. The first deck that I actually hit 6,000 trophies with was a golem battle healer deck, funny enough. That's how ridiculous she was. She was in every single archetype. She was so good that if you didn't use her, you were automatically putting yourself at a disadvantage. Her biggest issue was honestly her health. She was so tanky and she could just survive everything and just keep attacking everything around her and just heal everything within that radius, just keeping an entire push alive. But then a few months after the craziness, they decided to nerf her HP by 10%, and that was the end of the battle healer meta. She's been severely underwhelming pretty much ever since. But the issue is, if they were to buff her HP back, or buff her attack speed, or buff anything else about her, then we would have another battle healer meta. And now looking at the heal spirit, it's a pretty funny story as well. The heal spirit actually used to be the heal spell, and it was one of the worst cards in Clash Royale, if not the worst card in Clash Royale for multiple years. Even after they reworked it to be 1 elixir instead of 3, it was still trash. So then in 2020, they completely reworked it so that way it was the heal spirit. And that is when the chaos started. It had a massive healing radius, it healed a bunch, and it also did damage equal to that of an ice spirit. The heal spirit was the complete package for a 1 elixir card, and it completely dominated the game. Pretty much from March until the end of 2020, the heal spirit was a top 5, probably even top 3 card in Clash Royale. And don't even get me started with decks that use the battle healer and heal spirit. Yeah, that was a thing for a while. I'm glad that's not a thing anymore. But then after 3 major nerfs to the heal spirit over the course of the rest of 2020, it became irrelevant. A smaller healing radius, less damage, and less healing power completely destroyed the card. They did go back and rework it in 2021, but that rework actually nerfed its healing power, so the rework didn't really help it at all. So when looking at these 2 healing cards, what makes them hard to balance? It seems like the healing mechanic of the card is only good whenever the rest of the card is good. In the current Clash Royale meta in 2022, both cards still provide great healing, but because the other elements of them have been nerfed, the cards aren't used at all. But if they were to go and make those other areas stronger, then it would make the healing mechanic overpowered. So yeah, healing cards are kind of stuck in an interesting spot right now. So now we're going to talk about the 2 cards in Clash Royale that are centered around elixir. Well, like every card in Clash Royale uses elixir, but we're talking about the Elixir Golem and the Elixir Collector. So let's start out with the Collector. This card has honestly kind of been problematic from day 1 back in 2016. The Elixir Collector used to be 5 elixir, and also back then there was no earthquake, and that just left the Elixir Collector completely unchecked and completely broken. Even Hog Rider decks used to use the Elixir Collector. Look at this deck right here and tell me that this looks fun to play against. And the Elixir Collector was like this for an extremely long time, even when they made it 6 elixir in October of 2016. But then in 2018, they made it so that it can't appear in your starting hand, and that kind of destroyed the card. Some of the beauty of the Elixir Collector was how you could play it first play and pretty much automatically get an elixir advantage over your opponent. But with this change, that was no more. So the Elixir Collector was pretty much trash for about 4 years after that. But then in April of 2022, they made it so that way when the Elixir Collector is destroyed, it automatically gives 1 elixir back. So even if it doesn't pump any elixir, you're still getting elixir out of it. And this one change pretty much took the Elixir Collector out of the grave, and now it's back in the Clash Royale meta. Its stats don't show it, but I would argue that the Elixir Collector is one of the best cards in the entire game. Next up is the Elixir Golem, one of my personal favorite cards. And this card tells a very short and sweet story. When it was first released in October of 2019, it instantly became the best win condition in the entire game. And then when they released the Battle Healer, pairing that with the Elixir Golem, it was crazy. 1 elixir, 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 1 elix And then over the course of a few months, they nerfed the Elixir Golem's HP like 3 different times. And with these nerfs, it became borderline unplayable. It was kind of decent if you were an experienced Elixir Golem player, but for the average player, it was a pretty garbage card. And then like a month ago, they reworked the Elixir Golem so that way they changed how it redistributes Elixir, but that honestly made it worse. And now it's a top 5 worst card in Clash Royale. When looking at the Elixir Golem and the Elixir Collector, they have been either extremely good or extremely bad. There's hardly any room in between. So why is that? Similar to the healing cards, the Elixir-based cards take a core fundamental of Clash Royale and change how it works. The flow of Elixir is a set rate in Clash Royale depending on the time of the match and the game mode. And the Elixir Collector and Elixir Golem are just like, hey, what if that wasn't the case? In the Elixir Collector's case, it constantly gives you Elixir while forcing your opponent to respond to it, giving you a massive advantage. And if they don't respond to it, you still get a massive advantage because you're just getting extra Elixir pumped into you. That sounded a little sus. And while the Elixir Golem is the opposite and it gives your opponent Elixir, having something as tanky as the Elixir Golem for only 3 Elixir makes up for that fact. When both of these cards have been good, not matching those cards in your deck or not having a direct hard counter to those cards makes it really difficult to win, almost impossible. So ultimately, how do you change that? I don't know. Both of these cards are so fundamentally flawed, it hurts my head. Now let's talk about some movement. And the primary card that I want to highlight here is the Tornado. Now the Tornado is a really interesting card because I personally believe that no matter what Clash Royale does to it, it is going to be one of the best cards in the entire game. While the Elixir cards and the healing cards have kind of switched between being broken good and broken bad, the Tornado has always been broken good. The fact that you could just move cards around the arena at will is too valuable not to have. And so once again, as we've talked about throughout this video, the Tornado takes a core fundamental of Clash Royale with that being movement, and it just changes it. Apart from being able to move cards around, one thing that will always keep the Tornado being extremely good is the existence of splash damaging cards. Splash damage cards will always benefit from the Tornado, and the Tornado will always benefit from splash damage cards, and these two working well together will always keep the Tornado relevant. So with this being the case, how do you balance the Tornado? I honestly think you can't, even if you took away splash damaging cards entirely out of Clash Royale. The Tornado is still going to be one of the best cards in the entire game because you can pull stuff to the other side of the arena, you can move things toward buildings, and you can King Tower activate. There's so much utility with this card, it will always be broken good. But really quick, before we talk about that secret card that I mentioned at the end of the video, I would like to give Clash Royale some credit for balancing another movement card. And that card is the Fisherman. For the longest time, the Fisherman was like a lot of cards that we've talked about earlier, where it's either been extremely bad or extremely good and game breaking. But after like 3 years of consistently tweaking the card, it has found itself in a really decent spot in Clash Royale, where it is a good card and a viable card, but it's not incredibly broken. So I honestly want to give a big shout out to Clash Royale because they've done a pretty decent job of balancing the Fisherman. And so the last card that I want to talk about that I think is honestly truly irredeemable is the Mirror. We just had a meta where the Mirror was arguably the best card in the entire game, and it made Clash Royale really difficult to play. At least for me, that was the case. I've played this game ever since it released in 2016, and I think the Mirror meta that we just had is one of the worst metas that the game has ever seen. The Mirror is a really unique concept for a card, and I can really appreciate that, but just how it works has always been flawed. For the longest time, the Mirror sucked. It was arguably one of the worst cards in the entire game for the entirety of the game's existence. And all of a sudden, they buffed it, and it becomes one of the best cards in the entire game. And finding a balance between these two extremes, I don't know if it's possible. Giving the Mirror 2 extra levels makes it way too strong, but only giving it 1 extra level makes it way too weak. So what do? I've seen a lot of people say to make the mirror for the exact same level and for the same elixir cost, but I don't think that really adds anything to it. Why would you mirror the exact same card with the exact same stats when you can have another card in your deck that can provide more value? I've also heard people say to let the mirror do +1 level for the same elixir cost, and I think that will have a similar result as what we just experienced, where the mirror will be a really broken card because you're getting better stats for the same elixir cost. That shouldn't happen. Really? I don't know how you balance the mirror. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any ideas. So all in all, what do these unbalanced cards have in common? It was a point that I kept reiterating throughout the entire video, and it's that all of these cards, they take a core fundamental of the game and they change how it works. When this is the case, it makes a card extremely hard to balance and keep it from being extremely good or extremely bad. And when cards like these typically do become extremely good, they nerf the other aspects of a card that aren't in line with the core fundamental manipulation. And because of that, it normally ends up killing the card because it means it can't manipulate as effectively. That was a mouthful, but I hope that made sense. So the ultimate question, can these cards that I've mentioned in this video be balanced? I have no idea. Let me know in the comments what you think. And also, if you do have some balance change ideas about these cards that you think could make them balanced, leave a comment with those as well. I really want to see what you guys think. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys today, and I'll see you all in the next one.